Alright then, time to make some kind of a wrap-up video of my previous LN2 session instead of making multiple short video clips here and there. So I got fairly large amount of LN2 just before the Easter weekend, and I actually spent quite a bit of time with it, like well over 1 week. That's fairly long, but it's the main reason for that is because my overall session ended up being just testing different small things and fault finding and testing a lot of like old parts and similar, and just doing test mounts and so on. So first of all, I did some tests with some upcoming next generation Intel stuff, which we can talk more about later. And then I obviously wanted to give a proper try with the now lapped Cascade Lake X 18-core CPU, the 10980XE. So I gave it a proper try now. So this is the same CPU you saw in my lapping video. So the overall lapping process is definitely great, very awesome if you ask me. So before actually running it on LN2, I did some dry test mounts with, using the Kimping Cooling T-Rex container to just determine how the thermal paste spread looks like after unmounting the cooler. So first, before actually trying on LN2, I did some dry mounts just on air. So I placed the CPU into the CPU socket, tightened the pot against the CPU just like normal, like if I was just about to pour LN2 into the pot, and then just quickly unmounting the pot after that. And it didn't look like that amazing. It looked alright after these air dry mounts. So here's a picture after one of these dry mounts. I actually showed these on my community page, and it looks alright. The thermal paste spread on top of the CPU IHS looks a bit like spider web, or similar to spider web. There are few packs of thermal paste here and there, but overall it looks alright. And after actually running the CPU on LN2, the thermal paste spread was really awesome. So here's a picture after unmounting the T-Rex container after running the Cascade Lake X 10980XE quite a bit of time on LN2. So there's like next to no thermal paste at all left on top of the CPU IHS. So that's really good, and it also shows how much the actual mount can differ in different situations. So I learned a lot about mounting overall during this session, and what are the reasons why we want to get the best possible mount. So the overall mount is a lot tighter when we run on LN2 because the cold temperatures shrink metal parts. So the overall mount becomes a lot more tighter. So it will squeeze a lot of the remaining thermal paste from the IHS when we go cold. So that's why there's significantly more thermal paste left on top of the CPU IHS after these dry mounts compared to the liquid nitrogen run. But even so, even when the thermal paste spread was amazing on top of the 10980XE, the CPU sadly isn't good at all when running cold temperatures. So the CPU was really awesome on air and water cooling, on water even 5.1, even a bit above 5.1 in multi-core tests like Cinebench on water cooling. That's really awesome result. All my other 18-core chips didn't even do 5 GHz for those tests, like 4.94 max or so, and this one did almost 200 extra megahertz more. So I thought it should be very good on LN2, but it seems so that many of these newer Cascade Lake X CPUs don't scale that well with temperatures compared to the old CPUs. But this all comes down to the actual chip. There are amazing Cascade Lake X CPUs on cold. For example, Kimping was recently running another chip he got on LN2 with graphics cards on LN2 for 3D tests, like even 4-way with 1080 Ti's. And he could run this new chip almost up to 6.1 in modern 3D. That's really awesome result. We will find out if I can test this particular chip later. That would be awesome. So sadly, so the CPU wasn't good. It only did like 5.6 to 5.7 in multi-core tests on LN2, and even 5.6 was relatively hard. So that's not really good at all, because there are 18-core chips that do 5.9 plus for Cinebench and so on. And the IMC of this particular 1090XE was very flaky at sub-zero temperatures. So when I was close to the cold pack temperature of like minus 105 degrees Celsius or minus 100, the IMC was very, very unstable without using those like sub PLL voltages. Normally, I really haven't had to use those PLL voltages with most of my CPUs, but this particular 1090XE requires them to stabilize the IMC when on LN2. So I let the 1090XE be, and I quickly retried the better 990XE, which I already ran last summer and so on, because it was quite good. It did 5.8 plus for multi-core tests like W Prime, GPU Pi, Geekbench 3 and so on. And it worked alright with this new X299 Dark, because I actually damaged the previous X299 Dark to some degree because I tightened the CPU pot too far. It bent some of the pins in the CPU socket, and it actually bent the whole socket itself. So now when I place the CPU into the socket, it kinda wants to grab the CPU in. So it's not really suitable for LN2 use anymore. The thing about this 990XE, the better one, is that the IHS isn't, the integrated heat spreader isn't actually that good. That's because this was actually lapped by the machine, the lapping machine over at Kimpin, which you saw in one of Gamers Nexus's video when he visited Kimpin's and EVGA lab in Taiwan, and they used the lapping machine with one of these 18-core CPUs. And you can actually note, if you look carefully, the edges of the IHS are kind of rounded, or they are like round. So you can actually see that the center of the IHS forms like some sort of a like ball or like round object anyways. So it seems so that the edges of this IHS are lower than the center of the IHS. So that's not really good. It's really, really bad compared to what I managed to do by hand with the 10980XE. So I will give it a go by hand on the 9980XE, because ultimately at the moment this is my best 18-core CPU at the moment. And you don't need the 28-core Xeon in most of the 3D tests. The 18-core part is actually better. And it's funny that Intel still rocks in many 3D applications compared to the new AMD CPUs. The AMD CPUs seem to be kind of really good workstation CPUs for the money. So they are like really good valued workstation CPUs. But in many like 3D applications, the Intel CPUs are still better, although they cost a lot more, which is kind of sad, obviously. So my original plan was to run the Cascade Lake X 10980XE plus the 2080 Ti Kimpin together on LN2 with two different power supplies in modern 3D like TimeSpy, Firestrike and Firestrike Ultra. But as I found out that the 10980XE is very bad on cold, I moved onto the 9980XE. I retested it quickly, see that it's alright with the X299 Dark. It worked alright. The old BIOS from May 2018 seems to be the best for Skylake X CPUs and Skylake X Refresh CPUs. The Cascade Lake X parts need a newer CPU, newer BIOS sadly, so can't use that one for the newer chips, but doesn't really matter. So when I got that sorted, I actually moved on to testing the 2080 Ti Kimpin once again, because as all of us know, everyone has the thermal paste cracking issue with the Turing cards. So the thermal paste cracking is really an issue with the 2080 Ti cards once you go colder, like minus 120 to minus 130. So I wanted to see if I could get any better result cracking wise to get more performance out from the card before putting the whole rig together with both CPU and card on LN2. And I also got this new tool from Kimpin, which is actually not yet released at the kimpincooling.com website. So this is the Inferno backplate GPU edition. So this is the same thing what we have had for CPUs quite a while now, available at kimpincooling.com. The only difference between this and the CPU one is that this uses a lot more power. So this particular unit draws more power from your power supply compared to the CPU model. So it's just heater unit integrated into graphics card LN2 container backplate, just like this. It didn't actually come with any thermal pad. I got this 1 centimeter thick thermal pad from China. I ordered this one from AliExpress and it worked really well. I did many mounts with this. It has cracked a bit already from very high mounting pressure at the center. So the good thing with this backplate was that I could use a lot more force when tightening the pot against the GPU. So I actually used pliers. I did like quarter round turns at a time on each of the thumb nuts. And it worked alright. The thermal paste spread looked really alright when I tested different thermal pastes. I first tried with the GPU backplate heater and this newer batch of KPX thermal paste which I got from Vince or Kimpin. He actually wanted to try new formula on the KPX thermal paste and he sent me a few tubes with that newer one, but I didn't really see any difference to the older one. So when I did the initial test, I tried to run the card just like the Greek guys did, and also David Miller from the USA. So I just let the card to be idle completely. So just let it be at idle, sit on the desktop and pour slowly towards full pot. And at minus 165 degrees Celsius I heard loud bang and the mount was gone. So it didn't change at all. I heated up and I just tried to run the card like at warmer temperature than at minus 165, and for some reason when I always ran the GPU Inferno backplate, I had worse cracking issues compared to running the card without the heater plate. That was really weird because most of the time when I tested different thermal pastes with the GPU Inferno backplate, I didn't actually hear any loud like bang when the thermal paste was gone. So I had like silent cracking even at temperatures of like minus 120 and minus 130. So I tested many different thermal pastes. I tried new KPX, I tried the old KPX from the jar, I tried Thermal Grizzly, Cryon Out Liquid Helium Edition, and I also tried the very dry thermal paste from Thermalright. So if you remember this thermal paste which I reviewed on my channel last year, not that long ago, so this is the Thermalright TFX, very expensive high-end thermal paste from Thermalright which was very, very dry. As it was so dry, I thought that maybe it's good on LN2 because if it's not that wet, it shouldn't crack that easy. So I even looked at the mount with the TFX thermal paste after trying it with the Inferno backplate, and the mount looked alright, but the thermal paste was obviously very, very like dry on top of the GPU die itself, as you can see on the picture right now. When I wanted to like give up, I moved on to running the card normally without the Inferno backplate again. I used new KPX and I ran the card quite successfully. So I actually improved the world record on single card 3D Mark Pro Royal, which I filmed using the capture card, which I already posted a video about, and it did alright. So I ran the card up to 2700 plus megahertz on the core with 2150 memories only at minus 135 degrees Celsius during the run. So the card is really, really awesome, and there's definitely more headroom in terms of clocks if I could just run the card colder. And we will soon get to the point what I'm thinking about now. So when I was testing these mounts, testing different thermal pastes, during one of these attempts, when I already did one run in 3D Mark IV Royal, I was about to run the test again. And what happened when I was on the transition page, so I was in the loading screen of 3D Mark IV Royal, when it was just about to start the test, so the loading screen ended, screen went black, it didn't start the test and the graphics card just shut down. And after that I was no longer getting any voltages or any lights turning on the card itself. And we found it out quickly, so the 12 volt input fuse on the 2080 Ti Kimpin blew. So for some reason EVGA is using these 12 volt fuses on the card just for protection reasons, and it happened to blow. So of course now the card doesn't get any of these voltages because the input fuse has blown. And the two options what to do with the card now was to either short the fuse, so doing it the risky way, just like with USB fuses on motherboards, or just send the card back to Kimpin where he could actually replace the fuse and maybe even try GPU lapping. So when we lap these high core count CPUs like a 10980XE, it's not only about getting temperature improvements, it's about getting a better mount overall. Just like on the picture after unmounting the cooler after LN2 session over here, there's so little thermal paste left on top of the CPU IHS, so there's less. The risk of cracking is a lot lower because there's not that much thermal paste left on top of the IHS that could crack. And the reason what's happening with the 2080 Ti, I'm pretty sure, and it's not really about the thermal paste anymore, because all of these thermal pastes crack at the same temperature level always and all the time. So the thing I think that the Greeks did 1 year ago with their card was that they lapped the actual GPU die of their 2080 Ti HOF. David Miller, I don't want to try to pronounce his nickname on overclock.net and HWbot because it's quite hard, but it's like Miller Killer 8080, 88, something like this. And he actually managed to lap his 2080 Ti GPU, and he even ran full pot. Not for that long period of time, but he managed to run full pot for some time anyways. So I really think that the key to get the 2080 Ti to colder temperatures and even to full pot is to lap the GPU die, because the carvings, the GPU model carvings on top of the GPU itself, they create this kind of unevenness on top of the GPU die itself. When I look at my old mount pictures from previous sessions with the 2080 Ti Kimpin, the overall mount doesn't really look good at all. The thermal paste spread is so bad, it's not really a wonder why the thermal paste always cracks at a certain point. So not really a point to test thermal pastes too far anymore. I should try the card again when the GPU die has been lapped, but it's really hard to do it at home. That's why I wanted to send it back to Kimpin, because at least he has better tools than me, so maybe he could try to do it. But it's quite obvious that he doesn't want to try it, because this 2080 Ti I have been testing is definitely one of the best 2080 Ti cards out there in the world. It's really, really awesome. It beats Titan RTX well in 3D tests, and it's far ahead of other competitor 2080 Ti models, especially in Port Royal. I'm like the only user that has ever gone beyond 30,000 points in 3D Mark Port Royal with single card, and it was the only run ever in the world where anyone has run 3D Mark Port Royal with average FPS over 60 with single graphics card, and that was filmed using a capture card. So no one can state that I cheat the test using some LOD or level of detail hack. You can see in the capture card footage that the picture is real and valid. There's no no graphics manipulation whatsoever in the actual test. So that was it. So I couldn't do my original plan, so run 2080 Ti Kimpin and 18-core CPU together on LN2 because the fuse blew. Now I actually shipped the card back to Kimpin with UPS. Let's hope it will arrive there safe and sound, because this coronavirus thing is ruining everything. Normal like packages aren't moving at the moment at all from here to outside EU countries. They are just completely stuck, and many parcels coming from China to Europe, they are completely stuck as well. So it's really hard. The only shipments that really move from EU to outside EU, like Asia, are these private shipping companies like DHL, UPS, FedEx, and so on, but they are really expensive. When I looked at the prices to send the 2080 Ti Kimpin, even just as naked card, so without heatsink or anything, to Taiwan, it would cost around 200 euros with value-added tax. So it's really expensive to use those services. But that's the only solution at the moment that works or moves during this coronavirus crisis. So that was the end. So when I couldn't test more, I just thought about trying, as I have had huge line of old CPUs, I wanted to get rid of them and end some like projects. So I moved on to testing some X58 parts. So I ran all of the CPUs, all of the X58 CPUs on the Rampage 3 Black Edition from Asus, which I think at the moment is the best X58 motherboard ever made. As I have tested many, I have some personal experience on what is good and what is not. So I have tested Rampage 3 Black Edition, Rampage 3 Extreme, X58A OC from Gigabyte. The X58A OC is really good for Gulftown when you have the multiplier control with the buttons. It's the best board for validations overall and W prime and so on. But it cannot do so well, at least my board can't do that good base clock, and the memories are a lot better on the Asus Rampage 3 Extreme and Black Edition. So in SuperPi and so on, the Rampage 3 Black Edition is better. And I have also tested two different versions of EVGA X58 SLI classified, which weren't that good, or they weren't so nice boards to my liking. And I have also tested the Foxconn bud rates, although that one I haven't tested on LN2 ever still. So I tested a huge row of CPUs. I managed to bin some Core i7 930 CPU, so that's the next step from the original Bloomfield Core i7 920. I got a few and I chose the one that was 2009 batch, so it was 2009 something, and it ended up being pretty much one of the best Core i7 930s out there. So I ran the CPU on Rampage 3 Black Edition with Corsair LPDA HyperMems as always. The CPU was really dodgy with PLL voltage, but it ended up doing alright. The best temperature for the 930 was around -98 degrees Celsius, so close to 100. I got all of the top scores on HWBot except the highest CPU-Z validation. Other guys who do a lot of X58 and 775 overclocking told me that the CPU is very good for a 930, because generally the 930 CPUs suck completely. They are really bad even compared to the older 920 chips. So that was alright. Then I moved on to the locked Gulftown CPU, the Core i7 970, which was never that popular back then. It was technically the same CPU as 980X and 990X, but it has a locked multiplier of 25. The original price tag wasn't that much cheaper, so people didn't like the CPU because it wasn't cheaper enough not to choose the more expensive unlocked model 980X or 990X. So that CPU ended up doing well, doing quite well again. I got the top score in PiFast, SuperPi 1M and 32M. Really good performance to say the least, so I beat the previous top score in PiFast by Solio from Denmark with 400 MHz lower CPU frequency. That was really awesome result. W prime and CPU Z validation impossible because this CPU only did like 6.3 pi fast 6G SuperPi 32M around 6G for W prime, so it's miles behind in quality compared to the CPU Pi. So Solio, although this CPU is also very good batch, it's Costa Rica 2010 week 31A, so it's 30 batch is 3031A. That's supposedly to be, that's supposed to be a very good batch among Gulftown CPUs. So there's that. I already posted an individual video about the 930 and 970 results already using the capture card yet again. Then I just messed around with some 980X Gulftown. So I actually tested the Q3 QP engineering sample of 980X, which I actually made a video about not long ago. So where the video where I binned these extremely rare AO stepping versions of the original Gulftown 980X. This CPU ended up doing well temperature wise, so it didn't have cope bug and not that bad cope boot bug either, but the overall scaling from temperatures was really bad. So the CPU was really bad. The max it could do for like W prime was around 6 GHz, and with 6 cores and 6 threads, so hyperthreading disabled, the max for SuperPi 1M Pi fast was only like 6.2. Then, just for lols, or I don't know how you want to call it, I took the risk with the Q3 QP and I disabled the physical cores, which I have been warning about for a long time, many times already. So I disabled the cores of this Q3 QP to 2 cores and 2 threads, and I actually gained. I was able to get the CPU higher to single core tests up to like 200 extra megahertz. So the max moved from like 6.2 to 6.4 for SuperPi 1M and Pi fast. So it was really nice gain. So that was only my personal test to see is it that risky. So I wanted to try the same with the legendary 7.2 GHz 980X because it's the only last solution to try the max on single threaded tests. So I took the risk with the retail 980X, which did 7.2 validation on X58 AOC and also the W prime records, and yes, the sad thing happened. So when I disabled the cores from 6 to 2, the maximum frequency didn't improve at all and the CPU degraded very quickly. So when I was able to post and boot the CPU with all cores and hyperthreading, even at close to 6.6, it couldn't boot to Windows XP even at 6.2 anymore, with no matter if it was 2 cores, 2 threads, 6 cores, 6 threads, 6 cores, 12 threads. So the CPU came down in quality dramatically within the matter of seconds or minutes. So when it comes to the retail Gulftown CPUs, I just would not disable the cores whatsoever. It might work on these old AO stepping engineering samples. They might not have the bug, but the retail ones, they nearly die when you disable the physical cores. So just don't do it. I took the risk, so I don't feel sad about it because that was the only last solution remaining. I tested all of the available boards. I tested Rampage 3, Black Edition, X58 AOC, 2 different versions of EVGA X58 classified. That was the only solution or only option remaining what I could try with the CPU. So I don't really feel sad about it. I used this moment as an option to learn from these parts, so it doesn't really matter. It's what we do. We take these risks every time when we run parts on LN2. So the 7.2 GHz 980X still works. It just can't do the same clocks ever again as before. So that's the end That's the end result with that CPU. So I used the last bits of LN2 with one Xeon Westmere CPU I got with one of the motherboards some time ago. So the model was X5675. It was never that popular CPU back then, but I just wanted to try it so I could maybe try it and then sell it afterwards. The CPU was alright, but temperature wise it could not go very cold, so I ended up benching the CPU at around temperatures like -70 to -85 degrees Celsius only. But I got the top score in W Prime 32M, 1024M and SuperPi 32M. Quite alright end result, and just no CPU Z, Pi Fast or 1M, but doesn't really matter. That's not that popular CPU, or it was never that popular CPU, so it's not really awarding on HW. But then I also tested two new Core i7 950 CPUs that I got. They weren't good on water, so I was kind of expecting that they would suck on LN2. I tested them thoroughly on LN2, so I double checked the PLL voltages so that I'm trying the best I can get with the PLL voltage, because they are sometimes very picky about the PLL voltage, and they sucked. They were really bad. So I can at least sell them. And the very last few liters of LN2 I used on my Xeon, the single core Xeon L3014, because last time I had some weird issues with the CPU, and I actually learned how to run newer operating systems than Windows 7 with those old 771 Xeons. So I was able to install Server 2012 and even newest Windows 10 1909 with the CPU when I hacked the SSE 4.1 instruction sets to the CPU with a BIOS update. So I used custom-made BIOS that enables those instruction sets for the CPU, and then I can actually run newer operating system than Windows 7. I just didn't remember that you can't use newer operating system than Windows 7 for benchmarks on HWBot with such an old platform, so I could not post, or I could not submit my score I made in Server 2012. So now I finally got screenshot of shared rank 1 score in Citybench R11.5. So the score was 1.85 FPS. Score was definitely alright, but due to the RTC bugs that are present on Windows 8 and newer operating systems with these old platforms, you can't submit any of those scores like Citybench scores without extra validation in newer operating system than Windows 7. So I have to rerun the platform on Windows 7, but it should be doing, at least it worked now. There were no bugs whatsoever with the combination, so the CPU was working completely well in the Rampage Extreme. So that's the end. And also one thing which I forgot. I also wanted to try the last retail 7740X CPU that I had. I got the information about the DMI mod from Nick Shee. So I wanted to link the DMI voltage from motherboard CPU PLL, so that when I adjust the CPU PLL voltage, it would also set the same value on DMI on the CPU. So you have to solder a wire from the board itself to one of those very small caps underneath the CPU. So the points, Nick Shee gave me the points for both VCC PLL and CPU PLL. I didn't want to use it with the VCC PLL because we often run the VCC PLL very, very high value on LN2. It's the same thing as Asus PLL bandwidth. Some CPUs even need that voltage up to 2.8 volts to run LN2, or even 3.1. If you set 3.1 on DMI, that will kill the CPU. So that's why I wanted to link the DMI voltage to the CPU PLL, because we never run CPU PLL or Asus PLL termination higher than 1.8 volts. So it's a lot safer option. Sadly, I managed to kill the 7740X CPU, so I damaged the actual cap when I was trying to solder on it. So I damaged it physically, so like half of the cap like flew away, so it got damaged physically. Physically. So the CPU only gives 00 debug at the moment. I could probably just replace the cap. It surely works, the CPU otherwise, or I might just, I don't know, I might just put it somewhere as paperweight. I don't know. That was the only solution left with the CPU, because I tested all the available options with that CPU already on the X299 OC formula, and that was the only solution I could try. But that already tells how good Shamino made the Rampage 6 Apex. Because on Rampage 6 Apex you can solder the DMI pin from backside of the board to the socket, and it will just touch that particular cap on its own. So that's huge advantage compared to other motherboard models from other vendors when they had the pin already available with the motherboard packaging. So I could have tried that, but I just could not get Rampage 6 Apex from anywhere in my quick time period. So I took the risk, and then now the CPU is not working. But that's how the game works. So that's pretty much the end of my LN2 session. Both good and bad things. With new and old hardware, I got many hardware top scores. 930, 970 and the Xeon, and also technically the L3014. So now I can sell many of these old CPUs which I don't want to use. And why I have so much interest on X58 and 775. I want to get as many top scores as possible with important 775 and X58 CPUs as possible. The CPUs that were popular back then, that have some historical value. 775 X48 platform, and X58 platform were the newest platforms at around the most golden era of home desktop PC. Those were the years of 2007 and 2010 or 2011. I think that's the golden era of home desktop PC, when home desktop system was the most popular ever in history. Back then there were no touchscreen phones well available yet, and also laptops weren't so strong back then to compete against good desktop PC. So I think around those years the home desktop PC was the most popular ever, and it will never be so popular compared to what it was during those years. And I want to get the best possible scores with the most important CPUs on those platforms. Like when it comes to 775, that means E6600, QU6600, E8600, E8400, maybe some very cheap Core 2 Duos, I don't know, but I already told most of the CPUs, and the most expensive like QX9770. When it comes to X58, the most important CPUs were, or the most popular CPUs were 920, 950 and 980X. 920 because it was the initial CPU for the whole platform. 950 was a DO-stepping improved version of the 920, which clocks quite good or quite well on average. And 980X because it was the first 6-core desktop CPU. Even though 980X was very expensive, it was hugely popular back in 2010 and 2011. Even with very high price tag, it was really purchased a lot. So it has a lot of historical value in overclocking and overall use. And when it comes to 980X, I have 3 out of 5 when it comes to top scores. So I have CPU Z plus W primes. I just don't have 1M, 32M and PyFast. So 3 out of 6. 920 I have all. 950 I have none. 930 I have 5 out of 6. And also the one one nice CPU would be the Core i7-9775 Extreme, which was the Dio-stepping version of the Bloomfield Extreme. I have some old engineering sample laying around somewhere over here. I need to test that one because some engineering samples were good. The thing I don't get about the 965 Extreme is that 965 Extreme retails all were C1 stepping, so the really bad version of Bloomfield CPU, but the top scores are made with some weird Dio stepping engineering samples. I think the scores are made with some old CPU Z that just read the 975 engineering samples as 965, but I could be wrong. But I want to try those CPUs as well, so that's my overall thing. I have some new things coming, so I actually ordered Kimping Cooling F1 Dark, because the bad thing about the Debauer Beast is that I can't use a North Bridge pot on the Rampage Extreme with the Debauer Beast because it blocks the hold down plate blocks the area where the North Bridge pot would be. So I got the F1 Dark for like compatibility reasons. I got it for a good price from Seal Too Fast, so kimpingcooling.com supplies Europe website. Go check that website out if you want Kimping Cooling, extreme cooling gear, and you live inside EU in the UK or in EU. Can't use T-Rex container properly on 775. For example, on the Rampage Extreme, the nearby V-core caps are taller than the CPU itself, so the CPU container touches those caps before actually making contact with the CPU itself. So that's why I wanted to get the F1 Dark. I don't actually even like the Debauer Beast that much nowadays. The only good thing about Debauer containers is the tremendous speed at Leidenfrost temperatures with liquid nitrogen. So Debauer's pots are definitely the fastest containers at room temperatures. When you make the initial pour with LN2, that's where Debauer pots rock. But when it comes to like pure temperature control, I don't like the Debauer Beast that much compared to T-Rex, for example, especially with high load CPUs. So I got a huge pack of Wolfdale CPUs. I will test them out. Then we have new next gen Intel coming out very, very soon. I hope the 2080 Ti gets fixed so I can try some modern 3D, and I hope the card will not get lost because I really want to run it again. I'm absolutely sure that the 2080 Ti Kimping card is completely alright. It just has the fuse blown, but otherwise the card is completely working. That's my gut feeling. There was no condensation or whatsoever that could have damaged the card. So learned a lot about mounting. The GPU version of the Inferno backplate is definitely good if you want to run GPU models that don't have thermal-based cracking issues that much and don't run that cold. Like, I don't know, maybe like some older graphics cards that usually like to run like from -60 to -130, like GTX 980, GTX 980 Ti, GTX 780 Ti. With those cards, the GPU Inferno backplate would be definitely awesome because there was no condensation at all on the card when I used the GPU heater Inferno backplate. And also the memories were a lot warmer this time, so if the memories on the card you want to run on LN2 get worse on LN2 due to too cold temperatures, the GPU Inferno will help you a lot. So that's the end. This ended up being a very long rambling video about my previous LN2 session, but I thought this would be a better option than making short clips of each parts that I made or which I ran. So that's pretty much it. I will show you more stuff what will be coming later. I will also show you some test mounts when I get the F1 Dark on the 775 Rampage Extreme. I might show you how I bin these Wolfdale CPUs and what to look for when binning them and so on. But that's pretty much the end. So thanks for watching this video. If you really watched this thoroughly from start to finish, and I'll see you on the next one.